Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. Continuing on, of course, favorite modern progressive art rock albums. I left off yesterday at number 108, so now we're going to be getting into the top 100. Again, these are, splitting hairs, a lot of it, but records that I really love to just, we're obsessed with the points anyway. So number 107, you have the first Mew album on this list, plus minus the sort of a gap in their time. It was like a 6-year gap or whatever from 2009 to 2015. It's the last album with their guitarist, Bo Madsen, which is interesting. But it was the return of the bass player, Johan, right? Johan Wollert. Anyway, or no, it's the other way around. My bad. The return of the bass player was the last album with Bo Madsen. Fortunately or unfortunately, but I love this record. The standout track on this record, this is from 2015, is the track Rose. It's like multi-part. It's got different sections basically, and it's prog. I mean, I don't know how long. It's like 7 or 8 minutes. It's in some ways it's like that, and Comforting Sounds are like their two longest, mini epics per se. But anyway, the rest of this record I like a lot of. I didn't find it as addictive as some of the previous records, which I sort of see as their sort of classic era of sorts. But between the Night Believer, which actually has Kimbra on it, I think she did it live with her. There's a song that Kimbra guested on this, but Satellites. That's the song that grew on me. I like the video for it. My Complications, Water Slides is another one. Cross the River on Your Own closes the record out. I mean, it's kind of less is more in some ways, but it's Mew. Mew has put out some epic records, and they've put out some shorter records, which work in a lot of ways too. But yeah, I love Mew. I'm a Mew fanboy, so this is not necessarily my favorite Mew record, but I still have this record has only gotten better over time. So number 107, Mew's Plus Minus from 2015. So number 106, the last/final album from the band Anathello. I talked about their first album yesterday, Luminescence in the Atlas Position. This is Canopy Glow from 2008. This says 2009, but it was 2008. So it has the release date there. Toward the end of 2008 came out. I love this whole record, but I guess there's a couple of go-tos in that Noni's Field and The River. Those two are probably my favorites. This thing came out on vinyl, which I'd like to get it on vinyl. But yeah, I mean, to me, this is Anathello sort of refining the production and some of the arrangements. It's a little more poppy, a little more happy than some of the other records, but still has the Anathello sort of chamber rock sound. Although, I mean, it's not maybe quite as emphasized as much as some of the previous records, which I'll be talking about, at least one of them. But, of course, one or two of the members of Anathello went on to be in Fun, which is interesting. But Matt Joint, the lead singer, I don't know what he's been doing. Look on his profile closely. It doesn't say anything about that. He was in a band called Younger, which I don't know if so they put out something a few years later. I never heard the Younger record, New Message, but probably need to look into that at some point soon. Anyway, Anathello's Canopy Glow, the final record from them, at number 106 on the Progressive Art Rock albums list. So number 105, Self Again, which I think this is probably it might be the final Self album on the list. I consider this sort of in a lot of ways the best full length. I kind of flip-flop between some of the other records, but came out in 1999, Breakfast with Girls. And this has Meg Ryan and Susie Hughes Sail Away. Those two in the middle are among my favorites. This is, I mean, I know the production on some of the records, including Ornament and Crime, like I talked about yesterday, is better, but from a sort of pop and power pop melodic sense, this might be their best record. And Sucker's another one that I enjoy, the title track. This is just a great example, I think, of Matt Mahaffey or Self kind of coming into his own and trying to, going more even directly pop or power pop than, and it worked on a lot of songs on this record, and that's why I put it this high. So that's why I kind of consider it my favorite full length album. I kind of consider that EP, Fake Nice, Super Fake Nice, the best thing that he's done. Although he's going to be putting out an album soon, hopefully in the next few years, maybe next year. That based on that last EP, that could top all this stuff. But I love Breakfast with Girls from Self, 1999. Anyway, number 105, number 104. My favorite album from Minus the Bear, and really the only, I mean, again, no spoiling too much. The only record on this list that I believe I have from Minus the Bear, Planet of Ice from 2007, and they actually worked with they had a King Crimson element on this, and I want to say they worked with they were like recorded this at Daryl Hall's studio or something like that. There's a bunch of other connections about this record, but yeah, they were listening to a lot of like King Crimson in Prague at the time when they wrote this album. My favorites, it's kind of a a record that beginning to end is really great, but I mean Burying Lock, Nights, Dr. Liling, Double Vision Quest. I remember when I saw them a few different times live, they played a few of those tracks. I was like really happy, really excited because the rest of the Minus the Bears catalog is sort of hit and miss for me. But this to me is their crowning achievement. This is their most sort of album that flows the most, and again, they have the most layers. It actually captures the sort of Planet of Ice, that feel. It's got kind of a cool, mystical element to it at times. But yeah, before this, I couldn't fully get into Minus the Bear, but this is the album that's sort of like, all right, this is the record that works for me best. Unfortunately, they never have put out a record, like all the records that came since, I didn't like anywhere near this much. The previous albums I've sort of enjoyed a little bit, but not as much as this either. So anyway, Planet of Ice, number 104, from Minus the Bear from 2007. Number 103, the debut album from Warpaint, The Fool from 2010. And yeah, I mean, I love the first EP most, probably from Warpaint, but I love their new record too now. This album has Undertow, which got a lot of radio play, and while I think it's fair to say that Undertow doesn't represent their full sound, it still is an example of the kind of songwriting they're capable of, and it's just an earworm, poppy, energetic track. But they have all these other tracks, like the self-titled song, Bees, Composure, Majesty, a lot of that sort of dreamy, psychedelic pop rock, folk, neo-psychedelic works totally throughout this record. And again, I have the wrong choice on here for the because this would have like reviews and stuff, because this got to be pretty popular when this came out. But yeah, I love their albums, and I mean, among their full lengths, it's splitting hairs, of course, but I kind of still lean toward this among all their full lengths. But the records that have come out since, even the self-titled, which I need to revisit, I think still is an example of why I love Warpaint. They're all female band. One of the only all female bands I can sadly claim to be a fan of, or be really into, be passionate. That's not true anymore though. The Warning, the new band, the similar name, are all female as well. I'm really getting into them. Anyway, number 102. I'll do the next list now. 102. So the second album from Tokyo Jihen, and by most people's assessments or taste, at least a lot of their fan base, this is considered their best record. It's called Adult. I'm not sure how to translate in Japanese. There's more to that, but there is something a little different about this album. Although my friend didn't really give it the best review. It is the jazz rock kind of with the J-pop rock style, but I find that this album, maybe among all their records, I return to more because of, I guess it was because of the energy and the way each track worked. Now, granted, I can't tell you song names. I'd have to pull up a translator, but this is kind of, to me, this is their peak. They have a lot of other great albums and great songs, but this is if you've never heard Tokyo Jihen or Chino Ringo's solo stuff, this is as good of a place as to start. So in fact, even on Rate Your Music, it's kind of a cult album because it's number 63 just for the year 2006. So came out January 2006. Adult from Tokyo Jihen, just missing the top 100. Number 101, Into It, the debut album from Ramona Falls, Brent Knopf of Ramona Falls. somewhat more piano driven project now. It's sort of his full time gig, or he's the primary gig. He's got that LV project also with that guy from the National. But the thing about this record is, while I think Prophet had some, especially the song Spore, better than anything on this album. This album I think is a little more consistent, though it's kind of splitting hairs because that album was pretty high on my list too. But I think I can't really. I don't have a ton of like Russia's one. Maybe people think of this album. I know that like their local radio station, like the college station, has played that, but it's got a great kind of crescendo on that track. I Say Fever, Electric, Salt Sack. This album has great flow to it. What's the Always Right? That one always comes up because I bug my wife about it. Because someone always has to be right. It's kind of repetitive in a way, but it's got a funny sort of charming message, at least initially. I don't know if you listen to this album 100 or 200 times, you might get burnt out on that track. But I can see why it was written. I can totally, relate to it in a lot of ways. So anyway, from 2009, Into It by Ramona Falls, an album that I did buy on vinyl after having to search a bit for it. Ramona Falls, Brent Knopp, formerly of Phenomena, number 101. So the big no, number 100, Clan Zoo. They made the top 100 just barely. Their debut album, I believe, because I think they had like an EP before that. Yeah, they did, which I've never actually. I don't have heard like tracks. I really probably should know that better. But this is called Rua. Band from Australia that some people have compared to Dredge. I hear Dredge elements in their sound, but I think that's that's just a vague comparison. If I went for favorites on this, probably you're listening to the last track. You're listening to A Dead Man Speak. It's haunting. It's epic. Gavin Declan DeBarra really that showcases his vocal prowess and sort of the songwriting really well on that track. They're like Murder by Death in that they're using folk and post rock with dynamics, and they use violin, I believe, just like Murder by Death does, and piano at times. I love this record, although it's splitting hairs between this and Black Coats and Bandages, which one I go to, and they were released back to back, like less than 2 years apart. But just kind of when push comes to shove, I feel like this is slightly more cohesive. I mean, Words for Snow is a great track. It is heavy on folk at times. I'll say that. It's not. You compare this to Dredge, which I don't think is the fairest comparison, or like Crippled Black Phoenix, or some of the other post rock stuff. I think that they kind of don't overstay their welcome, but all the people know that's another catchy earworm. That's great energy on that. Gavin, I keep on saying Gavin. Declan DeBarra's voice is he's distinct. It's like Fish with Marillion. While you can say Marillion sounded like Genesis, Fish had a very distinct vocal style which allowed them to stand out. Declan's vocals allow them to stand out over a lot of other bands that were kind of doing, I don't know, Tool influenced music, or post rock with vocals, or just from this era. He has he sings sort of with an accent, you could sort of tell, because he's actually from like Ireland, although he moved, I believe, down under. I hope I'm not getting him mixed up with Wally DeBecker, Gortia, but I'm pretty sure I thought he actually originally is from Ireland or the UK, and then end up moving down under. Declan DeBarra. I know he's been working in Hollywood. Yeah, he's originally from Ireland. He's working in Hollywood doing soundtrack music or writing like screenplays or something like that. Anyway, but Clan Zoo's Rua, the debut album from 2002, at number 100. So now we're getting into the top 100. The Family Crest, The War, Act 1, came out in 2018. An album that I probably, and I had it number 1 that year for 2018 for albums of the year. I think probably, Beyonce is another record that's going to show up soon that now would surpass it slightly. I felt like this album was beginning to end their best record, although I guess now I'm not sure. I think I have a couple records on the list still to come for them. But, Take Tonight, Never Gonna Stop are kind of biggest, and it keeps us dancing, the biggest sort of earworms. The last track, or that is like a trilogy of tracks, The Years, The Mighty Echo, and The Rocks Resting on Your Back, I really enjoy. Their style has been kind of the same, and this is no exception since really the previous record, and then the one that just came out this past year, that the chamber rock, the Deer Hunter elements, they're similar to Deer Hunter in some ways, they're similar to like Sufjan or Anathello, or Typhoon. They're in that same mold of using a lot of like cello and horn sections and Liam's vocal style. But yeah, this is still a pretty epic record, part of the whole war concept, and one I still enjoy. I still enjoy, and that's why it made the top 100. So The War, Act 1 from the Family Crest, number 99. And the final record, speaking of Anathello, the second one today to include on this list, number 98, Floating World. This is probably their most well-known record from 2006, and it's the album that I first heard about them. They were around before that, of course, because their debut album we talked about yesterday came out in 2001, but most people hadn't heard of them. This album, I don't have this. The people wanted to put it on vinyl. I don't have the track list on. Now I do. It's got a lot of long track titles, but this was probably the first album I really listened to extensively that used chamber instruments that I can think of. I mean, there may be something I'm not remembering, but the quote-unquote modern progressive chamber rock or chamber rock, Baroque rock, I almost call this like high school band rock, because they have like trombone and a lot of horns on here, besides like strings and everything else. A lot of percussion. The clapping is one thing that stands out on this album as well. I love this album. I have a little bit of issue with the way that the Matt Joint, the singer, sings so close to the microphone. Sufjan Stevens, there's a couple other singers, guy from Emmanuel and the Fear, Emmanuel, do the same thing. But other than that, it's got Hoodwink. It's got a few songs that stand out. Dokoi's House. There's a Japanese sort of vernacular that kind of made their way into some of the songs. And of course, I've got actually some bootleg footage or live recordings and of them going to Japan. So they had found a following in Japan. Hanasagaji, one, two, and three. I don't know how many there are. There's four. They're not really in sequence on the album. I think there's 4 parts of that. They should have released that whole thing as an EP or as a separate thing. But yeah, it's a positive, uplifting album at times. It's very dynamic. It's not as heavy as their debut album. It emphasizes more of the horns and sort of the percussion. They have some other albums, Holiday at Sea, of course. It's more layered than I'd say the one that came off I just talked about, Canopy Glow. But it's a record that you could listen to it probably 40 times and you would be hearing new things every time, because there's just so much going on it. But the praise it's received is from the people that know it. If you've never heard Anathello, it probably is. It's still as good of a place to start as anything. If you've never listened to chamber rock other than maybe the Deer Hunter. Actually, when I first heard the Deer Hunter, one person described the Deer Hunter like the Mars Volta meets Anathello. So, and that makes a lot of sense with them. So, anyway, number 98, I believe it was. Yeah, because I have to go back here. Anathello's Floating World. All right, we'll do another. Let's see. I don't know what we're doing for time. We're at 18 minutes. We'll do at least one more list here. So, number 97, Call Florence Powell's These Are the Plans, the debut album, which, doing some research, I believe it actually came out in 1999, but this says 2000. It was around that time, around the turn of the century. Matt Mahaffey, a.k.a. Self, he got to release this on the label he formed or was with, Sponge Bath, and then he plays on this. He plays on the follow-up EP, This Strange Situation, and, Apes and Androids. It's kind of, in a way, it's not. There aren't any songs that stand out as much on some of their other releases, but every song has some charm to it. Between Experimental Times, I'm Traveling, Valerie's Revenge, and these guys were like 17 and 18 years old when they did this. Periodic Table has like a hip hop element. It's kind of funny in a way. It's only 35 minutes, but it's it's if you like Self, if you know Self, or that kind of very DIY, organic sounding, but at times electronic sounding rock music around the turn of the century. This is right in that vein. And if you know Apes and Androids, which a lot of people don't know them, but if you've heard of them, it's a no-brainer to check this out if you've never heard it. So, Call Florence Pause, These Are the Plans, number 97 on the list. Number 96, the debut album. No, debut album. I have a lot of debut albums on this, admittedly. Debut album from the band Doves, Lost Souls, which I enjoy a lot of the Doves albums, but this I've always kind of leaned toward my go-to as the best. It has some of their best songs, from Here It Comes, Break Me Gently, Sea Song, Rise, and Catch the Sun. Catch the Sun gets played on a lot of the sort of, indie alternative college stations. I can't remember which one it was. I think it might be Here It Comes. Also, I think there's a song on here that's renamed that's basically channeling King Crimson. I can't remember. I think it says like one, unless I'm thinking it's on the next record, The Last Broadcast. I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, it's sort of Britpop doing prog or more psychedelic Britpop. I never got into the Britpop stuff that much. There's a few exceptions, but mostly like, the biggest bands, Oasis and Blur, I never cared for, really. Doves are an exception. They to me do that kind of thing, but they add a lot of layers to it. They add a lot of vocal effects. And this particular album, I think the songwriting is really, really well done. There's a 7.5-minute song called The Cedar Room, which, and I haven't listened to this whole record in a long time. I've listened to specific songs, but not, I should probably go back and revisit it. It might have ended up a little higher even, but anyway, Doves, Lost Souls, number 96. In fact, I think I have that record on vinyl, but I'm not sure. Number 95, Sigur Rós' Brackets. This is, a highly praised record. In some ways, it's the signature record of Sigur Rós' catalog by a lot of people's. Since some people like the record before it, which I think I had on honorable mentions. I can't remember. I can't even pronounce it very well. It's like, I don't know the album before it, but it was an album from the late 90s, the blue one I bought for Record Store Day a few years ago. Agetes Bergum or whatever. I can't, pronouncing it. Agetes Bergum, yeah. When I got into Mew, I was reminded of Sigur Rós. Though that's only a vague comparison. But, of course, this is the album that has no song titles. It's just untitled. It's a dreamy, sort of cinematic in some ways record that it flows really well beginning to end. And so in that sense, I totally appreciate it. Although it's not a record I listen to that often. I'll always associate the documentary I saw on them at midnight when it was like 10 below out in Minneapolis many years ago in 2008 or whenever it was. And that kind of made me want to kind of continue to pursue Sigur Rós' music. But this record is mesmerizing. For the right mood, it's like a perfect medicine. Sigur Rós, I had got food poisoning many years ago and I listened to some Sigur Rós. It totally made me feel better. But I can say that a lot of their other records, other than Agetes Bergum, don't really have, to me, as much of sort of the sort of concept, or don't go as far to me as this particular record and that previous one. Anyway, number 95, the Brackets record, or parentheses, from Sigur Rós, the Icelandic band that made up their own language, of course, Anyway, number 94, Long Distance Calling's Trips, from 2016. Now, they've had singers on a bunch of their records, and there's been some of them they didn't have any singing. This album, I don't know if it's a different singer they brought in, but I loved his vocals, specifically on the song Lines. That's a just banger. The energy on that song is off the charts. I love Long Distance Calling, and I'll just say this is not the only album from them on this list, of course. But in some ways, I see this as like I know a lot of the people that don't love this record. Like one of my friends gave it 2 stars, so I just think that they kind of, it's a little bit like Jazz Kamikaze with Supersonic Revolutions. They manage to sort of combine elements, and of course the artwork is a little bit expository, but they manage to combine elements of like, besides post rock and progressive rock, other elements in this to work really well. So anyway, Trips from 2016 from Long Distance Calling, number 94. Number 93, Carnival Themata, their debut album. and what I consider still the best Carnival album, which a lot of people think that's Sacred because they love the album that followed it. The production I don't have issues with. This came out in 2005 originally, and then it eventually was distributed. I think it was like 2007, 2008. It was 2007 in North America, but it's got a couple of just bangers. The first two, Coat and Themata, that kind of introduced them to me and everyone. And it's you call it alternative metal or heavy art rock, heavy progressive art rock, heavy there's a Tool element. They're named Carnival. Of course, they're from Australia, but there's a lot of bands from Australia that love Tool that are doing this kind of heavier Tool influence, hard rock or metal. But I remember there's one track in here. It was either here or on their MySpace had this great trumpet part. But Roquefort, Shutter Speed, Change Part 1, those are all really progressive. Scarabs, the energy at times is off the chart. The guitar riffs, unfortunately I can't claim that, the records that have come since I've enjoyed as much, but, production or non-production. But this record specifically has always been a big deal to me because it really made me a fan, and it kind of had me believe that there are other bands besides Fair to Midland that was doing this kind of music that I would get into. And Carnival is really one of the other specific ones. So, number 93, Themata from Carnival from 2005. All right, we'll do one more because I think we're kind of getting up in the time. You have 26 minutes. We'll do one more list and call it a day, I think. So, number 92, Coheed and Cambria's In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. Great record. They, really embraced the prog more on this one compared to their debut album. The energy and the pop element still there. The hooks are throughout, like a trademark of the records I really love from Coheed, when they write a hook and it just kind of doesn't leave my mind, my brain. A Favor, House Atlantic. I don't know, that whole suite at the very end. That's right. The 2113 ends the album. You got these are all like this little individual pieces. Let's see here. What are the other highlights? The one about pulling the trigger, pulling the trigger, and there's I always think of like it's a war or like some kind of this album kind of brings me thoughts of like sort of, it's a sci-fi story, of course, based on this comic book that Claudia Sanchez came up with in the whole Amory Wars. I think of it sort of in wartime. There's a song they're talking about that. Is it? I can't remember if it might be. Well, anyway, I can't name it off the top of my head, but I know The Crowing's another sort of go-to song on this record. A lot of people love the record after it a lot more, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I think that to ignore this specific record would be silly because I think they had those back-to-back records were just fantastic to me, and I know people that loved it. They actually did a string quartet did a tribute to this. That's how sort of well received and well regarded this record was. So anyway, number 92, Coheed and Cambria's In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3, which came out in 2003. Number 91, the debut album from Foals, Antidotes. Foals are a band that, they've had many records I enjoy. They had this long streak, and I include the new album now, so they really haven't put out a bad record. This album is the most overt math rock and probably in some ways the best energy, because this is an album, I have the vinyl pulled up, of course. This is an album that I can just listen to and I can just get 2-3 times as much work done. I remember when it first came out, I liked it, but I wasn't sold on it, but it just grew on me more and more. I liked Block Party at the time, though, so the Block Party thing kind of helped, but because Block Party was doing sort of mathy rock in some ways as well. Cassius, let's see here. Two Steps Twice. That song, especially live, is just unbelievably great. The energy is just off the chart. Like Swimming, Balloons. There's some bonus tracks I'm not even seeing. There's a song called Tennis, I think, I've always enjoyed. But yeah, Antidotes. This is a record that I always liked, but then over some time after becoming a bigger fan of Foals, I enjoyed more and more, and I've listened to it many, many times over the last decade. So, Foals, Antidotes, the debut album from 2008, at number 91. Number 90, another debut album, Effloresce by Ocean Size from 2003. This is their most maybe Pink Floyd-ish album in some ways. The guitar textures are sort of very trippy at times. I mean, this is praised by a lot of their fans. A lot of people just worship this record at Fluoresce. I enjoy it a lot. I mean, I can't say, it's at times, it's my favorite, but for the right mood, it definitely is the best record to listen to from them. They had all these singles and EPs they released over many years until this came out. Catalyst, A Massive Bereavement, One Day All This Could Be Yours, Amputee, that was a single, I believe. Saturday Morning Breakfast Show, long forgotten, the ending epic. Women Who Love Men Who Love Drugs. The mood. This is filled with the dynamics. A lot of it's really heavy. A lot of it's kind of extreme in terms of the vocals. It's not just all clean vocals, but the dynamics especially totally win me over for this. And just kind of, Ocean Sighs are a band I absolutely adore, and I love Mike Vernard's solo record, of course, solo records. But this record is no exception among that whole list of releases. And I'm not alone in this feeling. So Ocean Sighs, FRS number 90 from 2003. Number 89, Act 3, Life and Death from the Deer Hunter. I talked about this in the Deer Hunter series earlier this year, of course. It's a great record, part of the Act series, of course, so it has the Act sounds. My highlights have always been sort of the closing tracks, Father and Life and Death, probably. But I mean, I would say This Beautiful Life. Let's see, Mustard Gas, of course, that's a staple, and you reference it in some other songs. They play it live frequently. What It Means to Be Alone, Writing on a Wall, that's just like a little intro into Incauda Venenum. The only song I don't care for on this album is Go Get Your Gun. The rest of it is really good. I mean, I kind of, he's put out, the Deer Hunter's put out so many records I enjoy. It's kind of been lost a little bit in the shuffle. And I have a big amount of nostalgia for it, but not as much as compared to some of the others. But at the same time, that's why it's this low. You think, well, this is in some people's top 50 or 30 records of all time. There's so many great records on this list. But anyway, The Deer Hunter, Act 3, Life and Death, number 89. Number 88. Okay, so Time of Orchids, Sarcast Wild. I don't believe I have the other Time of Orchids record from the mid 2000s, but I have this one. I've over time considered this to be the best Time of Orchids album. Time of Orchids from 2005, Sarcast Wild. Time of Orchids are on John Zorn's label, the same label that releases like albums from or had at least KO Dot. It's avant-garde rock music, experimental, but the experiments for me work. Some people compared the vocal style to Mew, and that kind of, when I had never spent a lot of time listening to Time of Orchids, that kind of won me over. Like, he's kind of like Jonas from Mew or Jonas, but it still works. My favorite track among many tracks is All We Ever Wish. The build on that song is just mesmerizing. It's melancholy. It's an epic record, and that ends the album more or less. You have that track Whim at the very end, but I just found that while the songs are experimental, especially compared to the other Time of Orchids records, this one, the experiments work. It's like they kind of, and this was their final record, sadly, I think. Well, no, I think they put out a record in 2007. Let me just see, composer series, like modern classical. Yeah, I'm thinking of Namesake Caution. So, but I know between the two of them, I felt like Sarcast Wild was slightly better. I think I own at least those two, maybe all four of them on CD. But yeah, I mean, if you like avant-garde music and if you like Mew, Time of Orchids is a band to check out. I could probably do a video on them. I should just revisit their catalog, because I felt like Sicketh and like Maudlin of the Well, they were a band that like I didn't get into after they basically were done, and I always felt sad about that, because I know they had a little bit of an interest in the prog scene, and I wish I would have been around when they were. But I know one of the main guys from the band was on Color of Air podcast with Greg Massey from Maudlin of the Well and KO Dot. I can't remember which guy it was. It may have been Jesse Krakow. Anyway, but yeah, Time of Orchids, Sarcast Wild, number 88. Let's see here. Where are we at for time? Yeah, I think we're going to call it a day, because we made it through another 20-some records. We'll start tomorrow off if I can get another video in tomorrow. with number 87. But thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and we'll see you next time.